In the quiet mountains of Taisho-era Japan, the soft wind carries the scent of pine and smoke. A boy named Tanjiro Kamado lives with his family in a small wooden home high among the snow-dusted slopes. Life is humble, but warm. Tanjiro, the eldest son, supports his mother and siblings by selling charcoal in the nearby village. His hands are rough from labor, yet his heart is kind and gentle. Even in the harsh chill of winter, his smile carries warmth that comforts those around him. One morning, before the dawn had fully broken, Tanjiro set out on his usual trip down the mountain. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. By the time he returned home, night had fallen. The air was eerily still. When he reached his doorstep, he felt the world grow cold. The home that once held laughter and life was silent. Inside, he found only blood and bodies. His family, his mother, his brothers, his sisters, all gone, their warmth stolen. The snow outside was painted red. Amid the stillness, one faint breath stirred. His younger sister, Nezuko, was alive. Tanjiro clutched her, close, his heart breaking, yet desperate to save her. Through the snow, he carried her down the mountain, seeking help. But as the morning light began to stretch across the land, Nezuko's body twisted with a strange hunger. Her once gentle eyes now glowed with a demonic light. She had been turned into a demon. In that moment of horror and confusion, Tanjiro met a swordsman whose movements were sharp and graceful as the wind itself. His name was Giyu Tomioka, the water Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Giyu's blade was drawn in an instant, his face calm but resolute. To him, a demon was a creature of death, and Nezuko was no exception. Tanjiro begged for mercy, shielding his sister with trembling arms. In a desperate act of love, Nezuko, though transformed, protected her brother instead of attacking him. That spark of humanity moved Giyu. Against his duty, he spared them both, offering Tanjiro a single hope. "Find Sakonji Urokodaki," he said softly, sheathing his blade. "Learn to fight demons. Seek the path that might save your sister." From that day, Tanjiro's journey began, one of sorrow, hope, and determination. He carried his sister in a wooden box upon his back, shielding her from the sun that could burn her to ash. Every step forward was a promise to find a cure, to avenge his family, to protect what little remained of his heart. When Tanjiro found the man called Urokodaki, he was met not with kindness, but with tests of resolve. Urokodaki, the former water Hashira, was stern and wise. His face was hidden behind a red Tengu mask, his voice steady as the flowing rivers around Mount Sagiri. Tanjiro trained under him for years, learning the ways of swordsmanship, discipline, and the mysterious art known as water-breathing. The air grew sharp with each swing of his blade. His lungs stronger with every breath that synchronized his body to the rhythm of nature itself. Through long months of exhaustion and pain, Tanjiro learned to move like water, fluid, adaptable, and powerful. His compassion remained, but it was now tempered by strength. He faced endless trials, including the haunting final selection, where aspiring demon slayers faced demons in a forest steeped in moonlight and death. Many never returned, but Tanjiro endured. He emerged as a demon slayer, bearing his new sword, a Nichiren blade that shimmered darkly, almost black in hue, a color whispered to be rare and mysterious. At his side, Nezuko remained his silent companion, her demonic hunger restrained by will alone, sleeping for months instead of feeding. Together, they began their long journey across Japan, hunting demons that preyed on the innocent. Each night brought new terrors. Demons came in many forms, some monstrous, some eerily human in shape, all carrying the tragic echo of who they once were. Tanjiro's empathy shone even in battle. He did not fight only to kill, but to understand, to honor the humanity that demons had lost. His blade cut through darkness, not with hatred, but with sorrowful resolve. One of his first major battles tested every ounce of his strength, the confrontation with the powerful demon pair who manipulated threads from drums that changed space itself. With Nezuko's aid, Tanjiro survived. But it was another encounter that marked his path forever. In the bustling streets of Asakusa, filled with glowing lanterns and the chatter of city life, Tanjiro's senses were overwhelmed by an all-too-familiar scent, the same one that lingered in his destroyed home. It was the scent of Muzan Kibutsuji, the first demon, the progenitor of them all. Dressed as a gentleman, Muzan's calm demeanor masked the infinite cruelty within him. When their eyes met, the air seemed to stop. Muzan turned a man into a demon with a single touch before vanishing into the crowd. In that moment, Tanjiro's mission solidified into something greater than survival. He would find Muzan. He would destroy him and end the endless chain of suffering that began on that snowy night. After that encounter, Tanjiro met allies who would shape his journey. The gentle doctor Tamayo, a demon who opposed Muzan and sought redemption, and her assistant, Yushiro. They revealed to him that Nezuko's existence defied nature. Unlike other demons, she had overcome her hunger for human flesh through sheer will. Her very being was proof that a cure might exist. With renewed determination, Tanjiro continued his missions, each more dangerous than the last. His travels soon led him to meet two fellow demon slayers who would become his dearest friends, the cowardly yet loyal Zenitsu Agatsuma, whose lightning-fast reflexes surfaced only in unconscious bravery, and the wild, boar-headed Inosuke Hashibira, a fierce fighter raised by beasts. Together, their paths intertwined under the blood moon, forming bonds that would carry them through endless trials ahead. The newly formed trio, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke, embarked on missions under the quiet watch of the Demon Slayer Corps, their paths lit by moonlight and courage. Their bond began awkwardly, with Zenitsu's trembling fear and Inosuke's restless aggression often clashing with Tanjiro's gentle patience. Yet, beneath their contrasting natures, an unspoken understanding began to grow. Each of them carried pain, each of them sought meaning, and through shared struggle, friendship took root. Their next mission led them to a mountain covered in mist and heavy air, the home of the spider demon family. The eerie silence there seemed to breathe on its own, broken only by the cries of insects and the distant rustle of webs clinging to trees. Within the shadows, they discovered demons that imitated a twisted version of family, led by Rui, one of the 12 Kizuki, the elite demons serving directly under Muzan. Rui's threads were sharp as razors, his control absolute. His longing for familial love was born from loneliness and warped into cruelty. Tanjiro and Nezuko fought with all they had, their movements fluid like flowing rivers against Rui's intricate web. In a desperate moment, Tanjiro combined his water breathing with a mysterious form he had inherited unconsciously from his father. A dance of fire, flowing and radiant. It was the Hinokami Kagura, later known as the sun breathing technique, the origin of all breathing styles. With Nezuko's blood demon art igniting her blood into flames, they severed Rui's threads in a brilliant blaze of light and sorrow. Though the battle ended, Tanjiro and Nezuko lay wounded and near death, saved only by the arrival of the Hashira, the highest-ranking demon slayers. Their strength was overwhelming, their presence commanding. Gyu Tomioka stood among them once again, calm as before. Alongside him were Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira, whose soft smile masked a deadly precision. Kyojuro Rengoku, the flame Hashira, whose spirit burned with unwavering righteousness, and others whose names Tanjiro would come to know well. The Hashira brought Tanjiro and Nezuko before Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the gentle leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. His voice was soft and melodic, his face marked by illness, yet filled with kindness. Some Hashira doubted Nezuko, seeing only a demon that should be slain. Yet when she resisted the scent of blood before her, even the skeptics paused. Kagaya believed in Tanjiro's heart and allowed the siblings to continue their journey under watchful eyes. As months passed, Tanjiro's training intensified. Missions grew deadlier, but his resolve deepened. The world was wide, filled with both beauty and grief. Alongside Zenitsu and Inosuke, he continued to grow stronger, guided by memories of his family and the burning image of Muzan's cold gaze. Then came the mission that would forever mark their hearts, the Mugen train. A sprawling locomotive slicing through the night, filled with passengers unaware that death slumbered among them. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Nezuko boarded under orders to investigate disappearances connected to the train. There, they were joined by Kyojuro Rengoku, the flame Hashira, whose laughter and warmth felt like sunlight in human form. The demon haunting the train, Enmu, had fused with its very body, lulling victims into endless dreams before devouring them. Tanjiro found himself trapped in a dream of his family alive once more, their voices tender, their faces peaceful. Yet his heart knew the truth. With trembling hands, he chose to sever that illusion, whispering farewell before awakening into reality once more. Together with Rengoku and his friends, Tanjiro fought through the labyrinth of flesh and steel that the train had become. Enmu fell beneath their blades. But another shadow emerged from the darkness. Akaza, the upper rank 3 of the 12 Kizuki. His power radiated like a storm, his blows shaking the night itself. The battle between Akaza and Rengoku blazed brighter than the stars. Even when his body was broken, Rengoku stood unyielding, protecting every life on that train. His final words burned with hope. To keep moving forward, to never let despair dim their flame. When the dawn came, Akaza fled into the forest, and Rengoku smiled as the sun rose, whispering his mother's name. His loss carved an emptiness in Tanjiro's heart, but also left behind a fire that would never die. The days after the Mugen train were heavy with grief, but the world allowed no rest. As the trio healed, new threats emerged in the entertainment district, where demons hid among the glimmering lights of pleasure houses and winding alleyways. There, they met the flamboyant and powerful Tengen Uzui, the sound Hashira, whose confidence shone as bright as his jeweled headband. Disguised as courtesans, Tanjiro and his friends infiltrated the district, searching for a demon that had been devouring humans in the shadows. What they found were 2, Daki and Gyutaro, siblings bound in cruelty and pain, serving as upper rank 6. Their strength was immense, their hatred deep. The battle that followed was fierce and relentless, shaking the district to its foundations. Tengen fought alongside them with dazzling speed and sound, his twin blades clashing in rhythm with explosions of color and light. Tanjiro's movements grew sharper, his breathing more refined, and in the heat of combat, he glimpsed the fire dance of his father once again. With Nezuko's awakening power, flames of crimson consumed the battlefield. Together, with every ounce of strength, they brought the demons down. When Daki and Gyutaro fell, their final moments revealed a tragic bond, siblings abandoned and scorned by the world, holding each other even as their bodies turned to ash. Tanjiro bowed his head in silence, honoring their humanity in death. The victory was bittersweet. The cost was high. Tengen, gravely wounded, retired from battle, leaving behind words of pride and respect. For the Demon Slayer Corps, this victory meant something profound. After centuries of defeat, an upper-rank demon had finally fallen. For Muzan, it was an insult that rippled through the darkness. As Tanjiro healed once more, the war against demons began to shift. Each breath brought him closer to understanding the hidden power within the Hinokami Kagura, and each encounter revealed fragments of the truth, that the sun-breathing technique, the first and purest form of swordsmanship, held the key to defeating Muzan himself. And deep in the shadows, Muzan watched, his crimson eyes gleaming. For the first time in centuries, fear stirred within him. In the days after the battle within the entertainment district, the air around the Demon Slayer corps grew heavy with both loss and hope. The victory against an upper-rank demon had shifted the tides of fate, yet it came at a price that left hearts weary and bodies scarred. Tanjiro lay recovering from his wounds, his dreams filled with flickering flames, the image of his father's dance moving like fire beneath a winter sky. Each motion in that memory felt sacred, each step like an echo of a truth he had yet to grasp. As he healed, Tanjiro's thoughts drifted often to Rengoku's words. The fire, Hashira's final message, lived within him like a lantern in darkness, a reminder to move forward with courage, even when fear pressed close. With time, he returned to duty once more, though his path would soon take him far from familiar faces. One day, Tanjiro received orders to journey to a remote and secret place, the swordsmith village, hidden deep within the misty mountains. It was a sanctuary where skilled artisans forged the Nichiren blades, wielded by demon slayers. His sword, chipped and dulled from battle, awaited repair. Yet, what he would find there would be far more than a new weapon. The village lay nestled between rivers and forests, its forges glowing like stars in the night. The sound of hammers and fire filled the air, rhythmic and soothing. Among the smiths, Tanjiro met Hotaru Haganazuka, the eccentric and passionate swordsmith who had crafted his original blade. Despite his temper, there was care in every swing of his hammer. As Tanjiro rested in this peaceful haven, danger quietly approached. The safety of the swordsmith village was sacred, but Muzan's wrath had grown sharp after the loss of his subordinates. To erase his shame, he sent 2 upper-rank demons to destroy the village. Hantengu, the embodiment of cowardice and fear, and Gyoko, a grotesque demon whose art took form in writhing porcelain vases. When the attack began, the stillness shattered. The peaceful clang of hammers turned to cries of battle. Tanjiro, though still healing, stood to fight alongside the Love Hashira, Mitsuri Kanroji, and the Mist Hashira, Muichiro Tokito. Their strength was a sight of beauty. Muichiro's movements flowed like drifting fog, precise and detached, while Mitsuri's style was a dance of grace and fierce devotion. Hantengu's power was unlike anything Tanjiro had faced. Each time he was struck down, he split into new forms, each representing a powerful emotion: rage, sorrow, joy, and pleasure, until his many bodies filled the battlefield. Tanjiro fought desperately, his every breath synchronized with the rhythm of his sword. Nezuko, too, unleashed her growing strength, her flames now burning with divine beauty. As the battle deepened, Tanjiro's connection to the Hinokami Kagura became clearer. He began to move as his father once had, not through sheer strength, but through flow, rhythm, and will. The fire of his spirit melded with the steady calm of his breathing. Together with Genya Shinazugawa, a fierce demon slayer with the strange ability to consume demon flesh to gain their power, they fought through exhaustion and blood. In the end, beneath a scarlet sky, Tanjiro struck the final blow against Hantengu's true body, hidden and trembling in cowardice. Yet even in victory, sorrow lingered. As the sun began to rise, Nezuko, standing by his side, caught fire beneath the dawn's light. Tanjiro screamed, reaching toward her, the warmth of his sister slipping through his fingers. But then, impossibly, the flames did not consume her. Nezuko stood in the sunlight, untouched. She smiled, radiant and alive. The impossible had happened. A demon had conquered the sun. Word of Nezuko's survival spread like wildfire across the demon slayer corps. It was a miracle, but also a harbinger of greater conflict. For Muzan, it was revelation. The one thing he desired above all else, immunity to sunlight, was now within reach. Nezuko became the key to his long-sought perfection. His wrath turned to obsession. As Tanjiro and his friends returned from the village, the air within the core grew restless. Time felt heavier now, the weight of destiny pressing closer. The Hashira gathered more frequently under the fading blossoms of the Ubuyashiki estate. Kagaya, their leader, spoke softly through his illness, his face growing paler each day. Yet his eyes remained calm, as though he could see a light that no one else could. He knew that the final battle was coming. Under his guidance, the corps began intense preparation. The Hashira training commenced, a brutal regimen designed to strengthen every demon slayer, body and soul. The young slayers trained under each Hashira in turn. Under the gentle cruelty of Shinobu, they learned precision. Under the guidance of Gyome Himejima, the stone Hashira, they found faith in endurance. Even under Sanemi Shinazugawa, the wind Hashira, whose temper could shake the sky, Tanjiro learned humility and respect. Amid these trials, bonds deepened between comrades. Inosuke and Zenitsu, each in their own way, grew stronger. Inosuke's wild intuition sharpened into skill, while Zenitsu's courage began to stir, even while awake. They laughed, argued, and endured together, their spirits tempered like blades in fire. Yet even as they trained, the shadows of Muzan's army began to stir. The 12 Kizuki, reduced and desperate, moved restlessly in the darkness. Muzan, now more determined than ever, began his hunt for Nezuko, his every action guided by the scent of her sunlight-born blood. The night was still and heavy, the sky painted in dark clouds as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Deep beneath the surface, Muzan Kibutsuji stirred. His centuries of patience were nearing their end. His anger, his fear of mortality, and his desire for perfection all coiled within him like a storm. The demon slayer corps had grown stronger. The upper moons, once eternal, were beginning to fall. For the first time in his long existence, Muzan could feel the faint pulse of danger. Far away, within the secluded estate of the Ubuyashiki family, Kagaya Ubuyashiki sat quietly, his fragile body wrapped in bandages. His breathing was shallow, but his mind was clear and steady. Around him, his wife Amane and their children knelt, knowing what was to come. Kagaya had lived his entire life cursed by the bloodline that had once shared Muzan's origin. And though his body was frail, his will was stronger than the curse that bound him. As Muzan approached the estate, guided by Tamayo's hidden scent that drew him into their trap, Kagaya spoke softly to his children. His voice was warm, steady, and full of peace. He thanked them for their love, for their courage, and for believing in a world that could exist without demons. Then, as Muzan arrived, his calm eyes lifted to meet the face of the monster who had destroyed generations of his family. Muzan's presence was suffocating, his aura radiating dominance and fear. He spoke cruelly, mocking Kagaya's fragile body, mocking the futility of human effort. But Kagaya only smiled. He spoke gently, reminding Muzan that no life was wasted when it carried purpose, that even if he were to die tonight, Muzan's own end was inevitable. His words were quiet, yet they pierced deeper than any blade. And then, with a final breath, Kagaya Ubuyashiki ignited the explosion that had been prepared for this very moment. The estate burst into brilliant flame, engulfing both him and Muzan in a blinding inferno. The explosion shattered the silence of the night, fire dancing against the darkness as if the heavens themselves had opened. Muzan's body was torn apart, his flesh seared and blackened. But he survived. He staggered from the wreckage, regenerating through the smoke. Tamayo stood waiting, calm, composed, and ready. She struck him with her own creation, a drug infused with wisteria poison, designed to weaken his immortality and transform his cells into something fragile. It was her life's work, and she knew that delivering it meant her death. Muzan roared, his body thrashing as the drug took hold, and in his fury, he struck her down. Yet even as he devoured her, her soft voice whispered that it was not over, that his end had already begun. Then, as the night trembled, the Hashira and demon slayers arrived, led by the sharp resolve of the core. Giyu, Sanemi, Gyome, and the others converged upon Muzan's burning remains. Their blades gleamed in the moonlight, their hearts beating in unison. But before they could strike, the ground beneath them began to shift. The world itself warped, the sky folding inward, and the earth beneath their feet vanished into shadow. Muzan had unleashed his last sanctuary, the Infinity Castle. The demon slayers were pulled into its depths, scattered through the endless maze that stretched in every direction. The walls were crimson and pulsing, the floors tilted and twisting, and gravity bent like a reflection in a dream. The air was thick with demonic presence, every breath heavy with dread. Muzan's strongest servants awaited them within, determined to protect their master until the end. Tanjiro and Giyu found themselves in one corridor, their surroundings endless. They barely had time to adjust before a familiar presence emerged from the darkness. Akaza, Upper Moon 3. His gaze was sharp, his expression calm, yet there was something almost sorrowful behind his eyes. The battle began in silence. Giyu's water breathing flowed like a calm river, while Tanjiro's flame breathing burned with the rhythm of his father's dance. Akaza moved with perfection, every strike smooth and absolute. His strength was overwhelming, but Tanjiro's determination burned brighter than his fear. The memory of Rengoku's final stand filled the space between them, turning Tanjiro's grief into power. Akaza's strikes shattered the air, his martial art carrying the weight of centuries of combat. Yet as the battle wore on, something within him began to shift. Tanjiro's words reached him, not of hate, but of understanding. He saw in Tanjiro the reflection of a man he once was, long ago. When the final blow came, Akaza did not resist. He let the past wash over him. His final memory, one of love and peace, as his body turned to dust. Elsewhere in the castle, ice and blood collided in a battle of elegance and cruelty. Shinobu Kocho faced Doma, Upper Moon 2, the demon who had murdered her sister. Doma's voice was smooth and mocking, his smile eternal. But behind that calm mask lay a void as endless as Muzan's castle. Shinobu's movements were graceful, her blade cutting through the air like petals falling in a storm. She fought not for herself, but for her sister's dream, a world without demons. When her body fell, absorbed by Doma, the demon laughed, but the laughter soon faltered. Shinobu's body had been filled with a poison so potent it defied even Doma's regeneration. Her final sacrifice set the stage for victory. As Doma weakened, Kanao and Inosuke arrived, their fury uncontained. They fought side by side, hearts steady, movements harmonized. Kanao's calm precision met Inosuke's wild unpredictability, and together they brought down Doma. As he crumbled to ash, he reached toward the light above him, a gesture almost human. Deeper still, Sanemi and Gyome faced Kokushibo, Upper Moon 1, the most powerful of them all. His 6 eyes gleamed in the darkness, and his sword sang with monstrous beauty. He was the brother of Yoriichi, the man who had once nearly ended Muzan. Centuries of envy and bitterness had twisted him into this perfect, tragic form. His moon-breathing technique was devastating, every strike impossible to predict. Yet the strength of humanity lay not in perfection, but in unity. Sanemi's fury and Gyome's serenity moved as one, a storm balanced by prayer. The battle was fierce, but as Kokushibo's blade shattered, he saw his reflection for what it was, a man who had lost his way. His final words were not of anger, but of regret, before his body disintegrated into dust. With the fall of the upper moons, the castle began to collapse. The walls twisted, the floor buckled, and the screams of the dying demons echoed like a fading storm. The surviving demon slayers gathered in the trembling corridors, their breaths ragged, their bodies broken. And then, from the depths of the ruins, Muzan Kibutsuji emerged. His body was whole once more, the blood of Tamayo's drug coursing through him, fighting against his regeneration. His eyes burned with hatred, his voice filled with fury and despair. Around him, the last survivors of the Demon Slayer Corps stood ready, knowing this was the final night. And as the castle crumbled, they stepped forward into the dawn of the last battle. The night air was cold as the ruins of the Infinity Castle gave way to open ground. The earth had split apart, and in the quiet aftermath of destruction, the moonlight spilled across the shattered landscape. From the dust, Muzan Kibutsuji emerged, a shape both divine and monstrous. His flesh was pale and smooth, yet beneath it pulsed the veins of something ancient and restless. The drug Tamayo had given him had taken hold, but even weakened, Muzan radiated unbearable power. Around him, the Demon Slayer Corps began to gather. Their breathing was labored, their bodies torn from the battles within the castle, yet their spirits did not falter. For generations, this night had been foreseen. The moment when human hands would rise to end a curse born centuries ago. Tanjiro stood at the forefront, his blade trembling slightly in his grip. The marks of the sun. Breathing user burned faintly on his face, and his breath came in soft waves. Around him stood the Hashira, Giyu, Sanemi, Gyomei, Mitsuri, Obanai, all wounded, all prepared. The air between them and Muzan was heavy, every breath charged with centuries of hatred and hope. Muzan's voice broke the silence. Smooth and hollow, it carried both contempt and exhaustion. He spoke of the futility of human struggle, of how they had always perished before his perfection. But beneath his words was something else, the faint tremor of fear. For the first time in his eternal existence, he could feel the pull of death. The drug within him had begun to age his cells, slowing his regeneration, forcing his body to decay. Then the silence ended. Muzan struck like lightning, his limbs extending in monstrous waves, crushing everything in his path. The demon slayers scattered, each moving with practiced precision. Gyomei's chains clashed against Muzan's flesh, the sound like the tolling of a temple bell. Sanemi's wind breathing howled through the chaos, slicing the night air. Mitsuri's love breathing danced between the strikes, her blade curving gracefully as she deflected an attack that could have shattered stone. Tanjiro and Giyu moved together, flame and water in harmony. Each swing of Tanjiro's blade burned brighter than before, his breathing rhythm steady and smooth. The world around him blurred into the simple flow of movement. Inhale, exhale, step, strike. The rhythm of life itself. Hours passed like moments. The demon slayers fought not to defeat Muzan, but to endure him. The dawn was their ally and time their weapon. Every minute they survived brought the sun closer. Muzan's body twisted and expanded, transforming into a writhing mass of muscle and tendrils, desperate to crush the humans holding him back. Yet even as exhaustion overtook them, no one retreated. As the battle raged, Yushiro appeared among the survivors. His presence was silent, but steady. His mastery of illusions, cloaking the wounded, and guiding the medics through the destruction. His loyalty to Tamayo burned quietly, his every action a continuation of her will. Beside him, Kiriya Ubuyashiki, Kagaya's young son, commanded the corps from afar, his small voice guiding the survivors with calm precision. His father's death had left him trembling, but courage flowed through him like sunlight through clouds. The battlefield was chaos, yet within it, a strange serenity took hold. The demon slayers fought not with hatred, but with clarity. Each of them knew this was the final night. They fought for the people who had fallen, for families long gone, for the promise of a dawn that would never again fear the dark. Mitsuri's voice broke through the noise, a soft cry as Muzan's strike tore through her side. Obanai rushed to her, his serpent-like movements coiling through the air, his blade flashing like moonlight. Together, even in their exhaustion, they struck as one, love and serpent intertwined. Obanai shielded her from the next blow, his arms trembling as he held her. She smiled through the pain, whispering words of gratitude, her voice fading into the rhythm of battle. Guillaume's prayers continued, his beads clutched tightly in one hand as he swung his axe with the other. He fought with the calm of acceptance, knowing his end was near. His every motion was deliberate, each breath filled with devotion. Sanemi, beside him, bled freely, his scars illuminated by the rising light of the horizon. They did not speak, yet their resolve was the same, to hold Muzan here until the sun rose. Tanjiro's body screamed in protest. His muscles burned, his vision wavered, but he did not stop. Each time he faltered, he remembered the warmth of his home, the laughter of his siblings, the gentle hum of his mother's lullaby. He remembered Nezuko's small hands gripping his coat the day he promised to protect her. Those memories became his anchor, keeping him upright even as his strength began to fade. Then, amid the storm of battle, a new light appeared. Nezuko was running toward them. Her bare feet touched the ground softly, her eyes bright and clear. She was human again, her body no longer bound by the curse. Tamayo's medicine had worked. The sun that once burned her now warmed her skin. She called out to Tanjiro, her voice trembling with emotion. Tanjiro turned just in time to see her, her tears glinting in the half-light. That sight alone gave him strength he did not know remained. He pressed forward, his movements slowing, but purposeful. Every strike now fueled by the bond that had carried him through every hardship. Muzan, sensing the shift, grew more desperate. His body began to deform, the drug within him accelerating his decay. He lashed out in every direction, trying to destroy as much as he could before the end. But the demon slayers tightened their formation, their blades glinting in the dim light. The sky began to change. A faint line of pale gold appeared along the horizon. Dawn was coming. Muzan's rage grew unbearable. He tore through the earth, dragging himself and everyone nearby underground, desperate to escape the rising sun. The demon slayers followed him into the depths, refusing to let him flee. The tunnels shook as he moved, his massive form crushing the walls around them. Tanjiro pressed forward, his lungs burning. Every breath felt like fire, but he continued, striking again and again. Muzan's movements grew erratic, his regeneration faltering, his body cracking under the pressure of time. The dawn broke above them. Light began to pour into the cracks of the earth. Muzan's screams filled the world, a sound of something ancient unraveling. His flesh melted away, his body dissolving into ash. The centuries of cruelty, the endless nights of fear, all burned away beneath the morning sun. The demon slayers watched as the darkness vanished. The night that had haunted generations was finally over. But in the silence that followed, something began to move. From the fading remains of Muzan's body, tendrils of blood reached out and pierced Tanjiro's chest. The remnants of the demon's will forced their way into him. Muzan's final curse, his desperate attempt to live on. Tanjiro's body convulsed. His eyes turned crimson, his veins blackened, and his heartbeat stopped. The demon slayers froze, the triumph of victory turning to horror in a single instant. As the sun rose fully over the horizon, the boy who had carried their hopes became the last demon of all. The battlefield had fallen silent. Dust drifted through the broken air, carrying with it the scent of ash and blood. The sun had risen at last, spilling its warmth across the ruined ground, washing away the long and endless night. But amid that fragile light, a new horror began to stir. Tanjiro lay motionless at first, his hands slack around his sword. His eyes, once warm and brown, snapped open, glowing a deep, unholy red. The veins beneath his skin darkened, pulsing with a rhythm that was no longer human. His breathing stopped, his heartbeat vanished, yet his body began to move. Muzan's will, that desperate hunger for survival, had not perished with the dawn. It clung to Tanjiro's flesh like a shadow that refused to fade. The boy who had spent his life saving others now stood at the edge of consuming them. Nezuko was the first to reach him. She stumbled over the broken ground, her human voice trembling as she called his name. Her brother turned toward her slowly, his expression unreadable. The sunlight that should have burned him did not. Muzan's essence had evolved, perfecting itself within Tanjiro's body. He was immune to the light, a being who could walk beneath the sun, the one thing Muzan had sought for centuries. The demon slayers could only watch, their exhaustion blending into disbelief. Sanemi, his face torn and bloodied, raised his sword weakly, unable to strike. Giyu stood frozen, his grip tightening around his blade, the memory of Tanjiro's kindness flickering behind his eyes. None of them could bring themselves to attack. Tanjiro's movements were erratic, trembling between hesitation and instinct. The demon within him urged destruction, a voice whispering that everything he loved had betrayed him, that all humans were prey. But somewhere deep inside, the faint echo of his own heart resisted. Nezuko reached out, tears streaming down her face. She clutched his arm, calling his name again and again. "Come back," she whispered through the sobs. "You promised me, Nii-chan. You promised you'd come home." For a brief moment, the muscles in Tanjiro's face twitched. A memory surfaced, small and distant, yet warm. The scent of charcoal, the laughter of his siblings, the feeling of snow falling on his skin as he carried wood through the forest, the faint hum of his mother's lullaby. But Muzan's voice was louder. It spoke of eternity, of strength, of freedom from pain. It offered him power beyond humanity, a world where he would never again lose anyone. It told him that his suffering was proof that humanity was weakness. Tanjiro roared, the sound shaking the ground. The demon in him took hold, tendrils of flesh spreading from his back, striking out at the survivors. Giyu and Sanemi rushed forward, their blades meeting his monstrous strength. The clash rang like thunder, the impact sending dust spiraling into the air. But even in their desperation, they fought without hatred. Giyu's voice trembled as he spoke Tanjiro's name, reminding him of the people he had saved, of the compassion that had guided him from the beginning. Sanemi, bloodied and staggering, refused to give up, his every strike a plea rather than an execution. Nezuko continued to hold on, refusing to let go, even as Tanjiro's claws tore through the earth beside her. Her hands shook, but her voice remained steady. She spoke of their family, of their father's dance, of the quiet nights by the fire, of the promise Tanjiro had made to protect her no matter what. No, inside his mind, Tanjiro stood in darkness. Around him echoed the whispers of countless souls consumed by Muzan. Their cries were distant but suffocating, pulling at him from every direction. Yet through it all, he saw a faint light, the small figure of his sister, standing before him, human once more, reaching out her hand. In that moment, the memories of everyone he had met flowed through him. Urokodaki's teachings, Zenitsu's trembling courage, Inosuke's wild laughter, Kanao's quiet determination, Rengoku's fiery resolve, Shinobu's gentle faith. Each memory flickered like a flame, weak but enduring. Tanjiro's body trembled. The demon inside him screamed, but he began to push back. He remembered what it meant to breathe, the steady rhythm that had carried him through every battle, every hardship. He focused on that rhythm once more. Inhale, exhale. The breath of the sun returned, not as a weapon, but as clarity. His muscles tensed, then relaxed. The demonic corruption within him began to slow, the burning veins cooling as the sunlight continued to pour over his body. He could hear Nezuko's voice clearly now, steady and warm. It was the voice that had called him home every time he had fallen. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his hand and placed it over hers. The air stilled. The monstrous features faded. The dark veins receded beneath his skin. His crimson eyes softened back to the warm color of life. The tendrils fell away, crumbling into dust. Tanjiro collapsed, his body limp. Nezuko caught him, holding him close as tears fell silently onto his face. He was breathing again, weakly, but alive. Muzan's will had finally vanished, burned away by the same light he had feared for 1,000 years. The remaining demon slayers sank to their knees, their exhaustion finally overtaking them. They had lived to see the sun rise on a world free from demons. The cost had been unimaginable, but peace, real peace, had come at last. Giyu watched the siblings quietly, his sword falling from his hand. The faint sound of birds began to fill the air, their song soft and distant. The night that had stretched across centuries was gone. As the sun climbed higher, its warmth touched the ruins gently, illuminating the faces of those who had endured. The war was over. Humanity had survived. And in the center of it all, a brother and sister held each other in the light of a new dawn. The sun rose higher over the broken battlefield, its light stretching softly across the horizon. The world seemed to hold its breath in those early moments, as if afraid that any sudden sound might wake the fading echoes of the war. The ground was scarred and silent, yet beneath the quiet ruin, life was returning. Wind whispered through the ruins, carrying the smell of ash and soil, of endings and beginnings intertwined. Tanjiro remained unconscious for some time, his body frail and pale, resting in Nezuko's arms. Around them, the surviving demon slayers tended to the wounded, their movements slow and reverent. Even the ones who could still stand did so with the heaviness of ghosts, their bodies spent, their minds adrift between sorrow and relief. Giyu sat nearby, his breathing shallow, his haori torn beyond repair. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of peace pressing upon his chest. When Tanjiro finally opened his eyes again, the world seemed washed clean, his lungs filled with the scent of morning air, and for the first time since childhood, there was no trace of blood or fear within it. Nezuko was smiling through her tears, her hands trembling as she held his face. He tried to speak, but his voice was too soft, the words lost in the morning breeze. Still, no words were needed. In their shared silence, there was understanding that it was finally over. The other Hashira gathered what remained of their strength to honor the fallen. Shinobu's memory lingered quietly in the minds of those who had fought beside her. Rengoku's name was spoken with reverence. Mitsuri and Obanai's hands, still intertwined, were laid to rest together. Gyome's prayer beads, broken and worn, were placed near the graves of his comrades. The sunlight reflected gently across them, like small flames that would never fade. Days passed. The corpses of demons turned to dust, carried away by the wind. Villages that had once trembled in fear began to stir again. The crows that had served the demon slayer corps carried their final messages, not of battle, but of farewell. The organization that had lived and died in darkness for generations was no longer needed. Its duty was complete. Urokodaki returned to the mountains, his quiet home now a sanctuary rather than a training ground. Zenitsu stayed by Nezuko's side, speaking endlessly about the future they might one day build, his nervous voice softened by hope. Inosuke wandered through the woods again, wild and free, though from time to time he would visit the graves of those he had fought beside. Kanao sat quietly beneath the trees near the butterfly estate, watching the light filter through the leaves, the ghost of Shinobu's laughter still echoing faintly in her memory. Tanjiro's recovery was slow, but steady. His right arm never fully regained its strength, and the scars across his face remained as reminders of what he had endured. But none of it mattered anymore. The quiet life he had once dreamed of, a life where Nezuko could walk freely under the sun, had finally become real. He would often wake before dawn, stepping outside to watch the sky change colors, the warmth of the sunrise resting gently on his skin. He remembered the people he had met along his journey, the Hashira who had taught him courage, the friends who had fought by his side, and the enemies who had once been human, trapped in endless suffering. Their memories lived within him, woven into the rhythm of his breathing. He no longer carried the weight of vengeance, only gratitude for the chance to have seen the world brought back into light. Years turned into decades. The world continued to move forward, leaving the age of demons behind. Steam and electricity replaced torches and carts. Cities grew where forests once stood. Children ran through streets without fear, laughing in the sunlight. The Demon Slayer course faded into legend, its stories retold as distant myths, half believed and half forgotten. But echoes of that past still lingered. The bloodlines of those who had once fought continued on, unknowingly carrying fragments of the strength and kindness of their ancestors. In one small neighborhood, modern descendants of those long-ago warriors lived peaceful, ordinary lives. The Kamado family, distant descendants of Tanjiro and Nezuko, lived quietly, their home filled with warmth. They knew nothing of demons, only that they came from a line of people known for their gentle hearts. Zenitsu and Nezuko's descendants ran a small bakery, its shelves filled with sweet bread and laughter. Inosuke's lineage owned a nature park, tending to the land with the same wild, protective spirit he once carried. The descendants of Kanao and Tanjiro crossed paths often, drawn together, perhaps, by something deep in their blood, something unspoken and eternal. On the walls of their homes hung photographs of ancestors they had never met, faces smiling softly beneath sunlight. To them, they were just family portraits. But in those expressions lingered the same eyes, the same quiet determination, the same compassion that had once changed the course of history. In a museum at the edge of the city, a sword rested quietly behind glass, rusted and ancient, its hilt wrapped in worn fabric. The placard beside it read simply, "A blade from the Demon Slayer era." Visitors passed it without much thought, unaware of the countless lives it had once protected. Yet sometimes, when the morning sun hit the glass just right, it seemed to shimmer faintly, as though remembering the light of 1,000 battles long past. In another corner of the world, a young boy with bright, curious eyes and a keen sense of smell paused beneath a tree. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange warmth in his chest, a faint pulse of recognition, like hearing a song he had once known. The breeze brushed gently against his face, carrying the scent of distant mountains and fresh earth. Somewhere far beyond, perhaps in another time, his ancestors smiled. The world was quiet again. The night no longer carried the cries of demons, only the soft hum of life continuing on. The cycle of suffering had finally been broken. What remained was peace, fragile, beautiful, and alive. And beneath that endless open sky, the spirit of Tanjiro Kamado lingered not as a warrior, but as a whisper in the wind, a promise that kindness would always outlast darkness, that love would always lead the way home.